The emergency alarm echoed through the Galactic Council chambers as Ambassador Vextar rushed into the meeting hall. His blue skin had turned pale, and his forearms trembled as he approached the central podium. The other council members looked up from their floating seats, their various alien features showing concern. "Council members," Vextar began, his voice shaking. "We have a crisis on Valdris Prime. The situation has become far worse than we initially reported." The massive chamber fell silent. Valdris Prime was supposed to be a peaceful world, home to two species that had coexisted for thousands of years. The Kethani were gentle, fox-like creatures who lived in harmony with nature. The Ravenclaw were apex predators, wolf-like beings with metallic claws and telepathic abilities, but they had always maintained a careful balance with the herbivorous Kethani. "What has happened?" asked Councillor Zenth, her crystalline body reflecting the chamber's blue lights. Vexitar activated the holographic display in the center of the room. Images of destruction appeared, showing burned forests and abandoned Kethani settlements. 3 months ago, the Ravenclaw began hunting the Kethani systematically, not for food or territory, but for what appears to be sport. They have driven the Kethani population to the brink of extinction. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The Zeltharian delegate, a tall insectoid being, clicked his mandibles in distress. "This violates every natural law we know about Valdris Prime. The Ravenclaw have never behaved this way before." "It gets worse," Vextar continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yesterday, a Kethani nursery was caught in the middle of a Ravenclaw hunting party. 43 cubs are trapped in a cave system deep within Ravenclaw territory. No adult Kethani can reach them. They will die within days without food and care." The Nexus representative, a being of living metal and circuits, spoke with a mechanical voice. "Our preliminary scans show the cave system is surrounded by Ravenclaw forces. Any rescue attempt would face overwhelming opposition." Councillor Zenth leaned forward. "What about our military forces? Surely the Zeltharian shock troops can handle a rescue mission." Vextar's expression grew even darker. "We have already tried. 3 separate rescue missions have been launched. The first was led by 50 Zeltharian soldiers, the best warriors in the galaxy. None returned. The second mission included 100 Nexus cybernetic soldiers with advanced weaponry. They suffered the same fate. The third mission was our largest yet, 200 mixed forces with orbital support, and, prompted another council member, we found their remains scattered across 5 kilometers of forest. The Ravenclaw didn't just defeat them, they destroyed them completely, leaving the wreckage as a warning to others." The chamber erupted in worried conversations. Various species began debating solutions, but each idea was quickly dismissed. The Ravenclaw territory was too dangerous, the enemy too fierce, and the time too short. "What about negotiation?" suggested the Aquarian delegate, her gills fluttering nervously. "Perhaps we can reason with them." "Impossible," Vextar replied. "The Ravenclaw have refused all communication attempts. They seem to have lost all rational thought. It's as if they've become pure predators driven only by the hunt." Hours passed as the council debated. Each proposed solution met the same fate, deemed too risky, too slow, or too likely to result in the cubs' deaths. The rescued children would need immediate medical attention and careful transport. A large military force would be too obvious and would likely trigger the Ravenclaw to kill the cubs before any rescue could succeed. As the discussions continued, Vextar found himself thinking about a conversation he'd had weeks earlier. He had been attending a diplomatic function on Earth, and he'd witnessed something that had puzzled him at the time. A human soldier had risked his life to save an injured alien child during a minor accident at the spaceport. The human had acted without hesitation, without considering the political implications or potential danger to himself. "I have a suggestion," Vextar said suddenly, interrupting the ongoing debate, "but many of you will not like it." The chamber fell quiet again. All eyes turned to the blue-skinned ambassador. "We should hire a human." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Half the council began shouting objections while the other half looked confused. Humans were relatively new to galactic politics, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years earlier. Most species still considered them primitive and violent. "Absolutely not," declared the Zeltharian delegate. "Humans are too unpredictable. They lack the advanced training and technology needed for such a mission." "They're barbarians," added the Nexus representative. "Their military tactics are crude, and they have no understanding of advanced alien psychology." but Counselor Zenth raised one of her crystalline hands for silence. "Explain your reasoning, Ambassador Vextar." Vextar took a deep breath. "I have observed humans for several years now. They have one trait that makes them unique among all the species we know. When it comes to protecting young ones, any young ones, they become absolutely relentless. They don't consider species, politics, or personal safety. They simply act." "That sounds like madness, not a useful trait," scoffed another delegate. "Perhaps," Vextar agreed. "But consider this. We have sent our most advanced warriors, our best technology, and our most sophisticated strategies against the Ravenclaw. All have failed because we approach this as a military problem. Maybe we need someone who sees it differently." The debate raged for another hour, but eventually desperation won over prejudice. The Cubs were running out of time and no other options remained. By a narrow vote, the Council agreed to contact Earth's diplomatic corps and request their most capable protector. Within hours, the message reached Earth. The response came back quickly with a single name: Lieutenant Jake Morrison, former Marine and current diplomatic security specialist. His file showed an unusual record: 5 years of protecting Earth's ambassadors across the galaxy, with 0 casualties among those under his protection. "He has accepted the mission," reported the communications officer. "He will arrive on Valdris Prime within 18 hours. As the council session ended, many members exchanged worried glances. They had just placed the lives of 43 innocent cubs in the hands of a species they barely understood, facing an enemy that had already proven capable of destroying their best forces. Vextar remained in the empty chamber long after the others had left, staring at the holographic images of the trapped cubs. He hoped his faith in human nature would prove justified, because if it didn't, those children would die and it would be his fault for suggesting such a desperate plan. The countdown had begun. Jake Morrison was coming, and everyone would soon learn what happened when a human was sent to protect the cubs. Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship and onto the landing platform of Valdris Prime. The alien world's twin suns cast strange shadows across the purple-tinted landscape, and the air smelled of unfamiliar flowers mixed with something darker. He carried only a basic gear pack, his standard protective vest, and a simple plasma rifle. The Galactic Council observers waiting for him looked disappointed. "Where is your army?" asked Commander Thex, a tall Zeltharian whose insect-like features twitched nervously. "Where are your heavy weapons and battle armor?" Jake adjusted the straps on his pack and looked toward the dark forest in the distance. "Don't need them. Just need to get those kids out." "Lieutenant Morrison," interrupted Dr. Vela, a Nexus scientist whose metallic body hummed with electronic activity. "Perhaps you don't understand the gravity of this situation. The Ravenclaw have destroyed forces 10 times larger than what you've brought." "I understand perfectly," Jake replied calmly. 43 cubs are trapped and scared. Every minute we spend talking is a minute they're still in danger." Without waiting for further discussion, Jake walked to the edge of the platform and studied a holographic map of the terrain. The Ravenclaw territory stretched for hundreds of kilometers, filled with dense forests, rocky canyons, and natural cave systems. The nursery cave was marked with a red dot at the very heart of enemy territory. "The journey will take at least 2 days on foot," Commander Thex explained, "and that's assuming you encounter no resistance. Previous reconnaissance suggests the Ravenclaw have posted sentries every few kilometers." Jake nodded and memorized the route. "What do we know about their patrol patterns?" "They don't seem to follow any logical pattern," Dr. Vela responded, displaying tactical data on her arm screen. "The Ravenclaw move in groups of 3 to 7, appearing randomly throughout their territory. They seem to hunt both for prey and for intruders." "What about the cubs? Any way to communicate with them?" "The Cathani don't have advanced technology," Commander Thex admitted. "The cubs are too young to have learned long-distance telepathy. We can only hope they understand to stay hidden and quiet." Jake shouldered his pack and started walking toward the forest edge. The alien observers scrambled to follow him, their various forms of locomotion struggling to keep up with his steady human pace. "Wait," called Dr. Vela. "Shouldn't we establish a base camp? Create a communication network? Plan supply drops?" "No time," Jake called back. "Kids don't have 2 days to wait for us to get organized." As they reached the forest border, Jake paused and turned to face the group of aliens who had been following him. "This is where you stay. I go alone from here." The protests were immediate and loud. Commander Thex clicked his mandibles aggressively. "Absolutely impossible. You need backup, coordination, and tactical support. What I need is speed and stealth, Jake replied. Large groups make noise and attract attention. One person can move faster and hide easier. But you'll be completely alone against hundreds of Ravenclaw warriors, Dr. Vela protested. Jake smiled grimly. Good. That means they won't be expecting just one person to walk straight through their territory. Before anyone could stop him, Jake disappeared into the dense forest. The alien observers stared at the spot where he had vanished, unable to believe that their last hope had just walked alone into certain death. The forest was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. The trees grew in twisted spirals, their bark a deep, blue-black color that seemed to absorb light. Strange creatures scurried through the undergrowth, and the air was filled with the sounds of an alien ecosystem. But Jake had learned to adapt to new environments during his years protecting diplomats on dozens of different worlds. He moved carefully but steadily, using techniques learned from both military training and from studying the movement patterns of various alien species. Every few minutes he stopped to listen and scan his surroundings. The deeper he went into Ravenclaw territory, the more evidence he found of their recent activities. After 3 hours of travel, Jake discovered the first sign of the failed rescue missions. Scattered pieces of Zeltharian armor were embedded in tree trunks, torn apart by massive claws. The metal was scored with marks that suggested incredible strength and fury. Jake examined the wreckage carefully, learning what he could about Ravenclaw fighting methods. Further along the trail, he found the remains of Nexus equipment. Advanced weapons were twisted into unrecognizable shapes, and fragments of cybernetic components were scattered across a wide area. Whatever had happened here, it had been swift and utterly devastating. As Jake continued deeper into the forest, he began to notice something disturbing. The destruction wasn't random. The Ravenclaw had arranged the wreckage deliberately, creating a trail of psychological warfare designed to terrify anyone who followed. They were intelligent hunters who understood fear as well as violence. The first encounter came just as the alien world's suns began to set. Jake heard them before he saw them, a low growling sound that seemed to come from multiple directions at once. He crouched behind a cluster of spiral trees and waited. 3 Ravenclaw emerged from the shadows. They were even more imposing than the briefing materials had suggested. Each one stood nearly 3 meters tall, with powerful limbs and metallic claws that gleamed in the fading light. Their wolf-like heads swiveled as they sniffed the air, clearly aware that something was wrong in their territory. The largest of the 3, covered in dark fur with silver streaks, suddenly froze and looked directly at Jake's hiding spot. Jake realized that trying to hide was pointless. These creatures had senses far beyond human capabilities. Jake stood up slowly and stepped out from behind the trees. The 3 Ravenclaw immediately formed a triangle around him, their claws extended and their eyes glowing with predatory intelligence. The largest one, who Jake assumed was the leader, began to approach. Instead of reaching for his weapon or trying to run, Jake did something that confused the Ravenclaw completely. He stood perfectly still and made direct eye contact with the leader. There was no fear in his posture, no aggressive stance, just calm determination. The lead Ravenclaw stopped just outside of striking distance and tilted his head, studying this strange new prey. Then Jake felt something probing at the edges of his mind, the telepathic contact he had been warned about. Most beings experience this as overwhelming terror, as the Ravenclaw projected images of violence and death. But when the alien predator touched Jake's thoughts, he found something unexpected. Instead of fear or aggression, he discovered absolute resolve. Jake's mind held a single, unshakable focus. Get to the cubs, keep them safe, get them home. Everything else, including his own survival, was secondary to that mission. The Ravenclaw leader, whose name was Korth, had never encountered a mind like this. Prey animals fled in terror, predators responded with anger and violence, but this human showed neither fear nor rage, only an iron determination to protect young ones he had never even met. Korth withdrew from Jake's mind and took a step back. His 2 companions looked confused by their leader's hesitation. In their language of growls and telepathic images, they asked why he didn't simply kill the intruder. Korth studied Jake for a long moment, then made a decision that would change everything. Instead of attacking, he spoke in heavily accented but understandable Galactic Common. "Human," Korth said, his voice like grinding stone. You seek the trapped young ones. Yes, Jake replied simply. You know you will likely die in this territory. Maybe, but those cubs will live. Korth's eyes narrowed as he processed this response. In all his years as an apex predator, he had never met a being who accepted death so calmly while showing such fierce protection for others. This human was either insane or something entirely new. Come, Korth said finally. We will speak more. Korth led Jake through the darkening forest to a clearing where more Ravenclaw waited. Jake counted at least a dozen of the massive predators, their glowing eyes watching his every movement. Some were smaller and sleeker. Others bore scars from countless battles. At the center of the group sat a female Ravenclaw whose fur was marked with intricate silver patterns. This is Iska, Korth said, gesturing to the female. She leads the hunters of the Northern Territories. She has questions for you, human. Iska approached Jake with fluid, predatory grace. When she spoke, her voice carried a musical quality that contrasted sharply with Korth's rough tones. You claim to seek the trapped cubs, yet you bring no army, no great weapons. Why should we believe you are not another spy? Because I'm not here to fight you, Jake replied. I'm here to save those children. Children that are not your species, Iska pointed out. Why would you risk death for beings you have never met? Jake thought for a moment before answering. Because they're kids. That's all that matters. The gathered Ravenclaw exchanged glances, communicating through subtle telepathic touches that Jake could sense but not understand. Their confusion was obvious. The concept of protecting young from another species seemed foreign to them. Korth stepped forward again. You interest me, human. But interest is not trust. If you truly wish to reach the trapped ones, you must prove your worth. What kind of proof? Jake asked. Survive, Korth said simply. 3 days in our territory. No weapons except your hands and your mind. We will hunt you, and if you live, we will consider allowing you to attempt your rescue. And if I don't agree to this test? Iska bared her fangs in what might have been a smile. Then you die here now, and the cubs remain trapped. Jake looked around at the circle of predators surrounding him. Each one was capable of tearing him apart without effort. The smart choice would be to try negotiating different terms, or perhaps attempting to escape and find another route to the cubs. Instead, Jake unstrapped his weapon and his pack, setting them on the ground. 3 days, he agreed. But I want your word that you won't harm the cubs during that time. You bargain from a position of weakness, Korth observed. I bargain from a position of caring about those kids, Jake corrected. Do I have your word? Korth exchanged a long look with Iska. The female nodded almost imperceptibly. You have our word, human. The trapped ones will not be harmed during your trial. When do we start? Jake asked. Now, Iska said. And the entire pack melted into the shadows. Jake found himself alone in the clearing with only the clothes on his back and his training. He could feel the Ravenclaw moving through the forest around him, beginning their hunt. Most beings would have panicked or tried to find a place to hide and wait out the 3 days. Instead, Jake started moving. He had spent years learning from alien species, and he understood that this wasn't really about survival. It was about proving something to these predators. They needed to see what kind of being he was before they would trust him with the lives of the cubs. The first night was a game of movement and misdirection. Jake used every skill he had learned from tracking through alien jungles and evading hostile forces. He didn't try to hide from the Ravenclaw because he knew they could find him anyway. Instead, he made them work for it. When dawn broke, Jake had covered nearly 20 kilometers through difficult terrain. He had avoided 3 separate hunting parties and had managed to find water and edible plants. More importantly, he had learned something about his hunters. They were testing him, but they were also learning from him. The second day brought a more direct challenge. Jake found himself cornered in a rocky canyon by 5 Ravenclaw, led by a young male with distinctive red markings on his fur. Instead of fighting or fleeing, Jake did something unexpected. He climbed. The canyon walls were steep and treacherous, but Jake had trained in similar terrain on a dozen different worlds. As he climbed, loose rocks began to fall. One of the Ravenclaw below, barely more than a cub himself, was struck by falling debris and knocked unconscious into a narrow crevice. Jake didn't hesitate. Despite being hunted by these creatures, he immediately began climbing down toward the injured young Ravenclaw. The adult hunters watched in amazement as the human risked his own safety to help their pack member. It took Jake nearly an hour to reach the injured cub, and another 2 hours to carefully move him to safety. By the time he had the young Ravenclaw stable and conscious, the hunting party had called off their pursuit. They watched silently as Jake checked the cub's injuries and shared his water with him. "Why?" asked the red-marked male in broken galactic common. "Why help enemy?" "He's not my enemy," Jake replied, supporting the injured cub. "He's someone's kid." That night, Jake noticed the hunting patterns had changed. The Ravenclaw were still tracking him, but there was less aggression in their pursuit. They seemed more curious than hostile. The third day brought the greatest test. Jake woke to find Iska waiting for him alone. She sat calmly in the morning sunlight, making no threatening moves. "The young one you saved yesterday," she said without preamble. "He is my son." Jake nodded but said nothing. "His name is Tarek," Iska continued. "He is proud and sometimes foolish, as young hunters often are. Yesterday, when the rocks fell, he was in real danger. He'll be fine," Jake assured her. "Just needs to rest that leg for a few days." "You saved him without thought for your own safety. You were being hunted by his family, yet you risked everything to protect him." Iska's voice carried a note of wonder. "This is not behavior we understand." "It's pretty simple," Jake said. "Kids get protected. All kids, no matter what." Iska stood and began walking toward him. For a moment, Jake tensed, wondering if this was finally the attack he had been expecting. Instead, Iska stopped just within arm's reach and did something remarkable. She knelt. "Human called Jake," she said formally. "The hunt is over. You have proven something that we did not know existed. You protect young ones even when they belong to those who hunt you. This is honor beyond our understanding." "Does this mean I can go to the cubs now?" Jake asked. "It means more than that," Iska replied, rising to her feet. "It means you go with our help." Over the next few hours, other Ravenclaw began appearing in the area. Jake watched as Korth approached with a larger group, including several he hadn't seen before. The dynamic had completely changed. Instead of predators stalking prey, this felt more like a gathering of allies. "We have been watching you for 3 days," Korth announced. "You fight without killing, protect without asking for reward, and show no fear of death when others are threatened. These are qualities we respect. More than that," Iska added, "we have discovered something troubling. The cubs you seek are not trapped by accident. They are being held deliberately." Jake felt his blood run cold. "Held by who?" "Unknown beings with advanced technology," Korth explained. "They have been using the trapped cubs as bait, hoping to lure rescue parties into ambushes. This is why your people's previous missions failed so completely." "Then let's go get them," Jake said simply. "It will be dangerous even with our help," Iska warned. "These unknown beings have weapons and defenses we have never encountered." "I don't care how dangerous it is," Jake replied. "Those kids are counting on us." Korth and Iska exchanged another of their meaningful looks. Then Korth stepped forward and placed one massive clawed hand on Jake's shoulder. "Then we hunt together, human. For the first time in our history, Ravenclaw and Outsider will fight side by side." As the combined group prepared to move toward the cave system where the cubs were held, Jake realized that everything had changed. He was no longer a lone rescuer facing impossible odds. He had allies who understood the importance of protecting innocent lives. But more than that, he had learned something important about the Ravenclaw. They weren't the mindless predators the Galactic Council believed them to be. They were parents and protectors in their own way, and they respected strength of character over strength of arms. The real mission was just beginning. The journey to the cave system took them through the deepest parts of Ravenclaw territory. As they traveled, Korth and Iska shared what they had learned about the mysterious beings holding the cubs. The evidence painted a disturbing picture. "They arrived 6 months ago," Korth explained as the group moved through a dense section of spiral trees. "At first we thought they were just another survey team. Many species come to study our world. But their behavior was wrong," Iska added. "They avoided all contact with both Cathani and Ravenclaw. They set up hidden camps and used technology we could not understand." Jake studied the holographic images that Tarek, Iska's son, had managed to capture during reconnaissance missions. The beings appeared humanoid but wore full environmental suits that obscured their features. Their equipment was definitely advanced, featuring energy shields and weapons that left unusual burn patterns. "What changed 6 months ago?" Jake asked. "What made them start using the cubs as bait?" "The crystals," growled an older Ravenclaw named Vorth. They discovered the crystal formations beneath our territory. Jake frowned. What's special about these crystals? Korth shared a mental image through limited telepathy, something Jake was surprised to find he could partially receive. The crystals were beautiful, translucent formations that seemed to pulse with internal light. But more than their beauty, Jake sensed something else about them. They're valuable, he realized. Extremely valuable. More than valuable, Iska confirmed. Those crystals are used in the most advanced, faster-than-light drives. A single formation could power a starship for decades. So these beings are illegal miners, Jake concluded. They're using the conflict between your people and the Cathani as cover for their operation. Worse than that, Vorth said grimly. We have discovered that many of the recent attacks on Cathani settlements were not carried out by real Ravenclaw. These beings have been using holographic disguises to appear as our people during raids. The pieces began falling into place in Jake's mind. They're manipulating both sides, making it look like you're hunting the Cathani to extinction, which brings in Galactic Council forces. Then they ambush the rescue missions and blame it on you. Exactly, Korth confirmed. And now they have the perfect bait. 43 Cathani cubs trapped in a cave system, directly above their main mining operation. Any rescue attempt must pass through their defenses. As they approached the area where the cubs were being held, the group stopped at a ridge overlooking the cave system. Jake used binoculars to study the terrain below. What he saw made his heart sink. The natural cave entrance had been heavily fortified. Energy barriers shimmered across multiple access points, and he could see at least a dozen armed guards patrolling the area. But worst of all, he could see small cages positioned in clear view of anyone approaching the caves. They're using the cubs as human shields, Jake said grimly. Anyone who attacks the position directly will hit the children first. This is why we have not acted, Iska explained. We could overwhelm their defenses, but not without casualties among the young ones. Jake studied the position for another hour, noting patrol patterns and defensive positions. The beings had chosen their location well. The cave system was natural, but they had enhanced it with artificial barriers and weapon emplacements. Any direct assault would be suicide. There has to be another way in, Jake muttered. There is, said a new voice behind them. Jake turned to see a young female Ravenclaw approaching. She was smaller than the others, with unusual golden markings on her dark fur. This is Nara, Korth said. She knows these caves better than anyone. I have been mapping the underground systems for years, Nara explained. There are natural tunnels that connect to the cave where the cubs are being held. But they are dangerous. Narrow passages, unstable rock formations, and underground rivers. Can you guide me through them? Jake asked. It would be extremely dangerous for a non-Ravenclaw, Nara warned. The passages require specific climbing abilities and the ability to navigate in complete darkness. I'll manage, Jake said. What about the cubs? Can they be moved through these tunnels? Cathani cubs are small and agile, Iska said thoughtfully. If they are not injured or too weak from captivity, they could probably navigate the tunnels with help. Jake was formulating a plan when Tarek limped over to join the group. Despite his injured leg, the young Ravenclaw had insisted on participating in the mission. There is something else you should know, Tarek said. I managed to get close enough to overhear some of their communications. They are planning to move their operation soon. They know the Galactic Council will eventually send a larger force. How soon? Jake asked. Within days. They plan to eliminate the cubs once they finish extracting the crystals they need. Jake felt a cold anger building in his chest. These beings weren't just illegal miners. They were using innocent children as expendable tools. Then we move tonight. The plan is too dangerous, Korth protested. Even if you reach the cubs through the tunnels, how will you get them out past all those guards? We don't go around the guards, Jake said. We go through them. Jake outlined his plan to the assembled Ravenclaw. It was audacious and risky, but it played to both his strengths and theirs. The Ravenclaw would create a diversion by staging what appeared to be a massive territorial battle between rival packs. This would draw the guards' attention and hopefully cause them to reposition their forces. Meanwhile, Jake would use Nara's tunnel system to reach the cubs. Once he had them secure, he would signal the Ravenclaw to begin the real attack. But instead of a direct assault, they would use the miners' own tactics against them. These beings have been pretending to be Ravenclaw to frame you for attacks, Jake explained. So we're going to pretend to be them. It took several hours to prepare. Jake gathered what equipment he could carry through the narrow tunnels: basic medical supplies, emergency food, and communication devices. The Ravenclaw prepared their part of the diversion, working out timing and positioning for maximum effect. As the alien world's sun set, Jake found himself at the entrance to a narrow cave passage with Nara as his guide. The tunnel was barely wide enough for a human, and the darkness was absolute. "Stay close," Nara whispered. "Use your hands to feel the way and trust my guidance." Some of these passages drop into underground rivers. The journey through the tunnels was like nothing Jake had ever experienced. For hours they crawled through spaces so narrow he could barely breathe, climbed down steep rock faces in pitch blackness, and waded through underground streams that were ice cold. Halfway through, they reached a point where Jake could hear voices echoing from above. Nara gestured for absolute silence as they moved beneath what must have been one of the guard positions. Jake could make out fragments of conversation in a language he didn't recognize, but the tone was casual. The guards clearly weren't expecting any threat from below. After what felt like an eternity, Nara stopped and pointed upward. A faint light was visible through a crack in the rock above them. "The cave where the cubs are held is just above us," she whispered. "But we must be very careful. There may be guards inside." Jake squeezed through the opening and found himself in a natural cavern lit by artificial lighting. What he saw made his anger flare into rage. The 43 Cathani cubs were crowded into metal cages that were far too small for them. Many showed signs of dehydration and malnutrition. Several of the younger ones were crying weakly, calling for parents who couldn't hear them. But worse than their physical condition was the fear in their eyes. These children had been trapped in this nightmare for days, not understanding why they were being held or whether anyone would come to save them. Jake activated his communication device and sent a simple message to Korth. "Found them. Begin diversion in 10 minutes. Then he began the delicate work of freeing the cubs and preparing them for the most dangerous rescue of his life. Jake moved quickly but quietly among the cages, using tools from his pack to override the electronic locks. The Cathani cubs looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. They had never seen a human before, and Jake knew he must appear as alien to them as any other species. "It's okay," he whispered in the simple Cathani phrases he had learned during the journey. "I'm here to take you home." The cubs were weak and scared, but they seemed to understand that this strange being was trying to help them. The oldest cub, who couldn't have been more than the equivalent of a human 8-year-old, spoke in a tiny voice. "Are you the rescue person?" she asked in Galactic Common. "That's right," Jake said gently as he opened her cage. "My name is Jake. What's yours?" "Mila," the cub replied. "Will you really take us back to our families?" "I promise," Jake said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. As Jake continued freeing the cubs, he heard the sound of weapons fire in the distance. Korth's diversion had begun. Through the cave entrance, Jake could see flashes of energy weapons and hear the roars of what sounded like a massive Ravenclaw battle. The distraction was working. Most of the guards had moved toward the cave entrance to observe the fighting, leaving only 2 sentries inside with the cubs. Jake knew he had to deal with them before continuing the rescue. Moving with the stealth he had learned during years of diplomatic protection work, Jake approached the first guard from behind. The being wore full environmental armor, making it impossible to identify the species. But Jake could see advanced weapons and communication equipment. Jake struck quickly and silently, using techniques that incapacitated rather than killed. Within moments, both guards were unconscious and secured. Jake quickly searched their equipment, finding communication devices and what appeared to be remote controls for the cave's defensive systems. "Mila," Jake called to the oldest cub, "I need you to help me with the younger ones." "Can you do that?" The small Cathani nodded bravely. Despite her fear and exhaustion, she moved among the other cubs, calming them and explaining that the strange human was there to help them. Jake activated his communication device and sent an emergency message on all Galactic Council frequencies. What the alien observers didn't know was that this message contained coded information that would trigger a specific response from Earth's Defense Force. "This is Lieutenant Jake Morrison," he broadcast. "I have located 43 Cathani cubs being held by unknown hostile forces on Valdris Prime, requesting immediate assistance under the Morrison Protocol for Protection of Non-Combatant Juveniles. Back on Earth." Captain Lisa Park received the coded message within minutes. She had served with Jake during his Marine years and understood exactly what he was asking for. The Morrison Protocol was an unofficial procedure they had developed for situations where innocent lives were threatened by hostile forces. Prep the Resilience for immediate departure. Captain Park ordered her crew. Full tactical loadout. We have children in danger. Meanwhile, in the cave system, Jake was discovering that the situation was worse than he had initially realized. Several of the cubs were too weak to travel through the narrow tunnels, and others were injured from their captivity. He would need to find an alternative escape route. That's when the real enemy revealed himself. A figure in advanced armor entered the cave, flanked by a dozen guards. When he removed his helmet, Jake saw a reptilian face with cold, calculating eyes. "So," the being said in accented galactic common, "the famous human protector has arrived. I am Vexnal, and you have caused me considerable trouble." "Let the cubs go," Jake said calmly, positioning himself between the children and the armed guards. "They're just kids. They can't hurt your operation." Vexnal laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "On the contrary, these cubs are the most valuable part of my operation. Do you know how much certain buyers will pay for healthy Cathani young ones? Their telepathic abilities make them extremely valuable as living communication devices." Jake felt his blood turn to ice. This wasn't just about illegal mining. These beings were planning to sell the cubs into slavery. "That's not going to happen," Jake said, his voice carrying a tone that made several of the guards step backward. "I think it is," Vexnal replied, raising his weapon. "You see, I have studied your species, human. You are emotional and predictable. You will surrender rather than risk harm to these young ones." Vexnal was right about one thing. Jake would never risk the cubs' safety. But the alien crime lord had made a crucial mistake. He assumed that surrender was Jake's only option. Jake activated a device on his belt and spoke a single word: resilience. High above Valdris Prime, the Earth Defense Force ship Resilience dropped out of hyperspace with perfect precision. Captain Park and her crew had made the journey in record time, pushing their engines beyond safe limits. "Jake's signal is coming from the cave system," reported Lieutenant Ben Hayes from the communications station. "Multiple hostile contacts surrounding his position." "Execute Morrison Protocol," Captain Park ordered. "Precision strikes only. Protect the innocents at all costs." The attack that followed became legendary throughout the galaxy. The crew of the Resilience used surgical strikes to disable the mining operation's defenses, while avoiding any damage to the cave system where the cubs were held. But the real surprise came when Korth and his Ravenclaw warriors joined the attack. "Unknown human vessel." Korth's voice came over the communication channels. "This is Korth of the Ravenclaw. We fight alongside your warrior, Jake. Do not fire on Ravenclaw forces." It was the first time in galactic history that humans and Ravenclaw had fought as allies. The coordination was perfect. Human precision technology combined with Ravenclaw strength and knowledge of the terrain. Inside the cave, Vexnal found his carefully planned operation collapsing around him. His guards were abandoning their positions as explosions rocked the complex. But he still had one card to play. "You may have won this battle, human," he snarled, "but these cubs will die with me." Vexnal raised his weapon toward the cages of frightened children, but he never got the chance to fire. Jake moved with speed that seemed impossible for a human. Years of protecting diplomats in hostile environments had taught him to anticipate threats and react instantly. Before Vexnal could complete his attack, Jake was on him. The fight was brief but decisive. Jake's hand-to-hand combat training, combined with his absolute determination to protect the cubs, proved superior to Vexnal's technology and weapons. Within minutes, it was over. Vexnal was unconscious, his guards had surrendered, and Jake was kneeling among the cages, checking each cub for injuries. "It's okay now," he told them gently. "You're safe. We're going to take you home." The rescue operation that followed was flawless. Captain Park's medical team provided immediate care for the cubs while Jake coordinated with both human and Ravenclaw forces to secure the area. Every single cub was safely evacuated and not one life was lost during the rescue. But what truly shocked the galaxy wasn't the military success or the unprecedented cooperation between species. It was what happened next. When Galactic Council observers arrived to investigate the incident, they found Jake sitting in the rescued cubs' medical bay, reading them stories while they recovered. He had refused all medical attention for his own injuries until every cub had been examined and treated. "Why?" asked Ambassador Vexitar when he finally met with Jake. Why risk everything for children of a species you had never encountered before? Jake looked up from the small Cathani cub who had fallen asleep in his lap. Because they needed help, he said simply. That's what humans do. We protect kids. All kids. The aftermath of the rescue changed everything. The Cathani and Ravenclaw established the first peaceful cooperation agreement in their planet's history, with Jake serving as honorary mediator. The Galactic Council created new protocols for protecting non-combatant juveniles across all species. But perhaps most importantly, the galaxy learned something about humanity that would shape interspecies relations for generations to come. Humans didn't just protect their own, they would fight and die to save any child, regardless of species, politics, or personal cost. As Jake prepared to return to Earth, Korth approached him one final time. You have earned a place in our pack, human Jake, the Ravenclaw leader said formally. You will always be welcome among the Ravenclaw as a protector of the young. Thank you, Jake replied. That means more to me than you know. Jake looked back at the medical bay where 43 Cathani cubs were playing happily, their families reunited, their futures secure. In a few days he would file his mission report and return to his regular duties protecting Earth's diplomats. But everyone who had witnessed the rescue knew that something fundamental had changed. When children were in danger, humans would come. No matter the distance, no matter the odds, no matter the cost, that was who they were. That was what made them human.